I just want to start first by acknowledging that with regards to some of what I'm seeing as both confusion and misinformation, that we could have communicated with greater clarity around our guidance for Halloween. Especially right now, it's a challenging time for so many of the students we serve. And we know that children more than ever right now need to experience fun and celebration. Um, I think the thing that I would say is that fun and celebration can happen in ways that would not be at the expense of some of the children that we serve. Um, with regards to the work that we've been doing, there's never been a plan to cancel Halloween, but rather not to center Halloween so that each and every student that we serve would feel comfortable coming to school. So I want to also say that this has been consistent with our approach for the last 3 years. And it's not a policy decision, but operational guidance provided to administrators and staff in our schools. We ask administrators not to center the day on everyone having to participate in Halloween and to ensure that health and safety considerations were adhered to, especially with regards to COVID. As an alternative over the last number of years and continuing this year, many schools have chosen to wear black and orange as a way to mark the occasion in a way that allows more students to participate. Like other years, we expect that some students will show up in costume and they will be welcomed. In this way, students can continue to engage in learning activities that are similar to what we do with many other traditions and celebrations. This is one aspect of misinformation and what I'm now seeing as a couple of times where I feel that misinformation is being spread about the work that we're doing and being shared in the community in ways that's causing division and harm. As in public education, we want to ensure that all of the students that we serve feel comfortable coming to school. We're always open to constructive feedback that supports us to get better, but it has to take into consideration those being harmed by current practices. For those who connected with us to understand and clarify, I'm deeply grateful to you. For those who, might have gone about causing discord, by using language around cancel, I'd ask for them to think about the harm that they have done in this process to students and to the families that we serve. The harm that I am mentioning that has come about has resulted in some staff receiving racist and hateful messages, some of which have been borderline problematic and where we had to consider whether or not we needed to involve the police. We know and we understand, and there's decades worth of information, of research around populations of students that schools are yet to serve well, and that it hasn't been safe for all students. This is something that we have in public education seen, for example, some years ago when the province made the decision around healthy schools, there was a huge outcry from people about the types of food that would no longer be involved in schools. Still, we stayed the course. Here in our own board, we also dealt with that when we decided to raise the pride flag and when we had to address issues around grade 8 graduation last year in our system. There's no plan now or ever to cancel Halloween. I don't even have that kind of power, even if I wanted to, or if it was suggested that I wanted to do that. What there is a definite deliberate intent on trying to make sure that our schools are as welcoming and inclusive as possible in ways that can honor that Halloween is celebrated, but keeping in mind students who are and have been and continue to be harmed in the ways that it has traditionally been celebrated. I would like to pass it to Superintendent Hill to further explain some of our position.
Uh, Thank you. And through you, Chair, I think what we would like to communicate is that over time and over a number of years, we have come to understand that there can be unintended impacts that are harmful to some students and families, and there are a variety of those. Some of them include families who come from low-income households or who live in neighborhoods where hidden poverty may exist. Halloween often means that those families are placed in extremely difficult circumstances to choose to purchase costumes or materials to make costumes, or make the very difficult decision of buying food or a costume to send their student to school. And we believe that no family should ever be placed in this position. We also know that some children with particular learning and sensory needs and particular identifications have a really difficult time and are negatively impacted when there are costumes or whole departures from learning or disruptions to routine to which they are accustomed. We also know that some families, because of their creed, decide to keep their students at home, resulting in lost learning time, something that at this time, and especially over the last year and a half, we have to consider as crucially important, as students have missed a lot of time in school already. We also know that there's pressure that many young women feel and non-binary identifying students to dress in a particular way or not dress in a particular way in an effort to be appealing, and all of the accompanying body issues that can be attached to that. And that's some of the feedback that we have heard over time. It's important for us to remember that our schools must focus first and foremost on learning and well-being. We have a duty and responsibility to ensure that our students, every single one of them, all of them, have the opportunity to learn. And in many instances, families are finding themselves in difficulties, and that's often our students who are placed at the margins who are being impacted as a result. I've received a lot of questions about whether or not folks were consulted, and I just want to address that question of who was consulted. And one of the things that we know is when we are aware of and we know that certain individuals are being harmed, the traditional mechanisms of consultation through survey or poll may not work and may actually act in a way that is opposed to the harm we're trying to reduce. So consultation has happened in the form of feedback that we've received over a number of years from students and families who experience financial insecurity, families who have not attended school based on their culture and creed, young women and girls who feel harmed by the inappropriateness of certain costumes to which they're exposed, and by students who've been harmed by costumes that mock their identities and cultures. The feedback that we've collected over time from administrators and educators has been that they're concerned by the number of students who don't attend school that day. And this is what our consultation mechanisms have looked like over time. I'd also like to say to student trustee Soror that I do appreciate your sharing with me that polling information. And the student trustee collected information from her peers, collecting 263 responses to a question asked by a poll on social media. And if I might share this, the poll received 263 responses, 13 votes for which were in favor of canceling Halloween. That is how it was framed in the poll. And 25 votes voting to cancel all inequitable celebrations out of the total of 263 votes that were cast. And what you may see from that result is that the 225 votes were to keep Halloween. But I think that this is an excellent example of what happens when we look at data from an anti-oppressive lens. Because when I looked at that data, what I saw was that 14% of the students who responded identified that they had experienced potentially or vicariously some kind of harm from Halloween. And if we extrapolated that survey to our entire student body, what we would see is over 9,000 students who would experience some form of harm and who would be in favor of not having Halloween celebrations. And so I want to thank the student trustee for presenting that information, because we know, and it reminds us that sometimes we have to be very aware of the limits of majority rules thinking, which can sometimes lead to the oppression of minority voices. So I want to thank the student trustee for that and just share those few reasons why we did look into limiting the centering of Halloween this year in the WRDSB. Thank you.
Student trustee Soror. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, this is not a question, but I'd like to take the opportunity to commend the board for their strive for equity. As a representative of the student body and as a member of both racial and religious minorities myself, we welcome all efforts that would make WRDSB schools a more equitable environment. With that said, and based on the many discussions I've been having with students since last week, we would have hoped that the decision was communicated in a better way to us, as the disappointment of many of the students, some of which are marginalized students, stemmed from confusion, a lack of information, and unanswered questions about viable alternatives, rather than a lack of support for equity. So thank you for mentioning that communication aspect. Hopefully this occasion opens the door for a much wider discussion on how to optimally make WRDSB schools more inclusive, diverse, and equitable.